Hey, I'm Alex Radical from Board Game Co., although today isn't really a Board Game Co. video. This is more of a Gamefound video. To those who don't know, if you are new to the channel, I am also CMO of Gamefound. I usually try to keep these two things as separate as possible while covering things that are, adjacent spaces. But today, for the sake of, I guess just the clearest lines possible, please fully consider this a Gamefound video with all my Gamefound biases at play. Don't get me wrong, I will be coming at you with some data that we'll get to it. This is a very data-driven video, but at the same time, the very nature of my dual role means that for all accounts and purposes, please consider this a Gamefound sponsored video. Gamefound's not paying for the video, but I work for Gamefound, so blur that line as you will. But consider this a Gamefound video, a Gamefound sponsored video done by a Gamefound employee with all their Gamefound biases. Please do, just to make sure we're as clear on that as possible. I'm not trying to ignore the bias that exists. I'm trying to be as clear about it as possible. But also there's a very particular reason I'm doing this video, which I guess is kind of two parts, but more the second part than the first, which is I believe that Gamefound, in many cases, I'd argue most cases, but not necessarily all cases, and I'd say in most cases, I believe Gamefound is the best place to run your board game campaign. I think it's the best platform to run your tabletop campaign, and the second half is Kickstarter's lying to creators, and I don't think that's cool. I don't think that's cool, and that's a big part of why I decided to do this video. Because I do try to separate these things as much as possible. Every once in a while I do here's a Gamefound news video, just covering some new things. I try to balance the fact that at the end of the day, I do cover things that are news in the space. But this one is definitely going to lean towards very, very pro Gamefound, although it's going to be backed up by data. The data part, if you want to skip to the data part, we're going to cover the lying part briefly, and then we'll skip to the data part, timestamps down below. So let's cover the lying part, because it is a big part of why I decided to do this video. I don't know how far this extends. I just know that over the past month, I've encountered at least 3 instances of Kickstarter lying to creators in ways that frankly I don't appreciate and I don't think is a fair game. There was a seminar where they stated that Kickstarter has all these tax management tools, and they compared it to Gamefound and said Gamefound has no tax management. I don't even understand that at all. And I should note, by the way, I didn't reach out to Kickstarter. I did try friending Asher, their new head of games, to see if I can talk to him. Never got a confirmation on that, so I don't know. I did want to reach out first, but yeah, they have a seminar that states Kickstarter has tax management and Gamefound doesn't. I do wonder if there's some explanation for how that makes sense, given the fact that Gamefound literally started with the premise of like full tax management, VAT management, handles all that stuff, and it took Kickstarter ages to catch up to that, even partially, let alone to the capabilities that Gamefound has. I don't understand how that could be even partially viewed as true. And we're going to get to partial truth soon as well, by the way, because I think that's an interesting conversation almost in its own right. The second category is I was at a convention and I had a creator say, oh yeah, the Kickstarter people are just over here, and they're saying that Gamefound's conversion rate on followers is 10%. The conversion rate, for context, is if you have 100 people following the campaign, how many of those people are going to convert into backers? And they said, oh yeah, Kickstarter said your conversion rate is 10%. Which it isn't. I don't know where they got that number from. It's 23% is the current average. Even if you took our lowest year, I think the lowest year is 19%, our highest year is 25%, our average in general is a 23% conversion. And to be clear, there's 2 different kinds of conversion. There's how many of those followers converted. So if you have 100 people following, a 23% conversion means 23 people turned into backers. Then there's a separate conversion number, which is 41%, and that's for every 100 followers, on average, you will end up with 41 backers. But some of those backers weren't those who followed, if that makes sense. So not everyone, people can back without following, so you'll have a degree of your ratio of your backers to followers, which ours is 41%. But even if you're looking at the conversion rate, which is always going to be the lower number, that's a theoretically, I think it's always the lower number. It's usually the lowest number at the very least, but it's a 23%, which means they're walking around telling creators that our conversion rate is less than half of what it is, which again, I don't think is cool. And then the third one, this is actually in a deleted post, which I tried finding the post to reference it, and then I have the URL. I still have the URL. In fact, I'll throw the URL down below. The URL is gone because they've deleted their post, but over on LinkedIn, they posted that Kickstarter, and I'm going by some recollection here because the post is gone, I believe they said, oh, look, this year so far, Kickstarter's had 11 tabletop campaigns that crossed $1 million, and Gamefound has only had 4. And we promptly responded with the link to the actual data, because this is publicly available data, saying, hey, you got that wrong. You have 11 and we have 9. They still had more. They still had more. But they unnecessarily made up a wide disparity of numbers that just doesn't match reality in any way, shape, or form, and then deleted the post once we called out on them, which I appreciate the deleting the post, but no apologies, no correction, just a deleted post that was gone. This is all in the past month. I don't know to what extent this goes. I don't know how often or how frequent they are willing to lie to creators, and I don't think it's cool, and it's part of why I was like, hey, if you're gonna play dirty, so to speak, I'm not gonna play dirty. I'm not gonna lie to creators about your numbers, but I am at least willing to do like a full-on promo spot for Gamefound, which this video very much is. Like, I feel at the very least I want to get it out there that if you are a creator, if Kickstarter is telling you numbers, please double check them, because so far I have reason to believe that they are willing to, I want to say alter, like fudge the truth, but straight up lie. I can see that they're willing to straight up lie or make mistakes. Mistakes are possible. I should give them grace. They could be mistakes, but they are repeated mistakes and interesting. So I want creators to know that, which is hence the reason for this video. But also, I do want to highlight that there is a difference before we get into the part as to why I believe Gamefound is a better place to run your campaign, because I'm also going to have that there. I do want to point out there's a difference between highlighting stats that are better for you versus straight up lying. Like a good example is when we corrected that LinkedIn post, we actually, Gamefound had a post talking about how if you look at the top 10 most funded tabletop campaigns this year, Gamefound had 6 out of the top 10 and we had the top 4. Okay, so we had more out of the top 10 most funded. And Kickstarter could have highlighted that they had more campaigns that crossed $1 million. If they had just highlighted the actual 11 versus 9, they could have said, look, we have more campaigns that crossed $1 million, while Gamefound's highlighting we have more of the top 10. It is very possible for you to highlight stats that make yourself look better. That's marketing to an extent. It's part of what everyone does. Hey, we're the #1 rated olive oil in the country. There's no olive oil at Gamefound. The #1 rated olive oil in the country. But, one person's rating it based off of, based on, housewives in this category, or one's rating it based on the price to value ratio, one's rating it based on the texture and taste. It's always fine's a loose word, but it's always done where you highlight the thing that is true, but looks better for the stats that you're trying to do. And again, Gamefound will do this, Kickstarter will do this. Any platform will try to focus and highlight the stats that are the most optimistic to their image. There's no question with that. But I think there is a difference between trying to push the thing that makes you look better, which is sales and marketing, versus lying or having your information wrong about those things. And those are very different categories. So, now that I kind of covered the first half and a big part of the incentive, not even first half, the first few minutes of this video and a big part of the incentive as to why I wanted to this video, I'm going to shift to the second half, which is why do I think Gamefound is better? And if you'll bear with me, I said this part has stats, and I think it would be better on the computer over there. So I'm going to shift over there to try to figure out exactly what I can show you over here as far as stats, because I do have stats. I am a very data-driven person. In my last job, I was CEO of an e-commerce agency. I did the data I did the majority of the data at my last company, and I like data. I'm not despite the fact that my role to a certain extent is sales in terms of trying to get people to consider Gamefound and to utilize Gamefound, but a bigger part of it is to actually have the data that shows them why they should consider and use Gamefound. And to that end, one of the things that I have done over the past, I've done this for a while now, but I recently updated the data to be as comprehensive as possible, is I've been looking at reprint campaigns and trying to compare them. The reason I look at reprint campaigns, we'll dive into in a second, is because the biggest challenge when trying to figure out where a campaign is going to do better is you can't A/B test it. A/B test is the idea where you run things simultaneously and then see what does better. You can do that with a lot of things in life, but unless you literally launch 2 crowdfunding campaigns simultaneously and run them both, there's not really a good way to A/B test crowdfunding. And for a variety of reasons, creators don't do that. Best case scenario, they run a campaign after the other campaign, which at this point is no longer A/B testing, you're getting the stragglers, so it's not really a fair comparison. But if you compare campaign by campaign, it's very hard to get a sense of how a campaign, quote unquote, should have done. Even if you look within a company, it doesn't matter who you are, every company is going to have their best and their worst performing game. Whether you're Tabletop Tycoon and you have Everdell and Awarre of Whispers, 2 vastly different franchises, whether you're Simon and you have, Cyberpunk 2077 or even Dune did well, and then you have Marvel Zombies and all that, there's vastly different ranges as far as a company's own games. And so it's very hard to get a sense of how a campaign should have done. One thing that I have found the closest to that is looking at reprint campaigns. A reprint campaign is exactly what it sounds like. It's when you have a campaign, you have, I don't know, Tiny Epic Dungeons and then Tiny Epic Dungeon Adventures. You have Darwin's Journey and Darwin's Journey Oceania. You have Earth and then Earth and the expansions. There's all these different campaigns that you can do on a variety of platforms where you can take a look at the data and say, well, how did the original campaign do and how did the new campaign do? And even then, that's still not helpful because you would expect there to be differences. You would expect that the new campaign is at a different point. The first game may have been well received, may not. The new campaign has expansion content. But what you can do is you can look at full categories of that information. So what do I mean by that? What I've done over here, and excuse the very, very Excel-like spreadsheet, well technically it's Google Sheets, but this is basically a full sheet where what I've done is I've gone through 2024 and 2025. So I've gone through all of 2024 and all of 2025 so far as of around a month ago. I haven't updated the past month, but I've basically gone through the full 2024 and 2025. I'm happy to go back further. My old data was from further, but I want to be comprehensive. I pulled up everything from the past year and a half effectively. And I used Tabletop Analytics to get that. So Tabletop Analytics is a fantastic site where you can go ahead and look at a variety of things. So I went to Project Archive. You can filter by anything from the date. In this case, I use the date, the type of campaign it is. You can sort by the most funded. So I did that. I sorted by most funded. I filtered the tabletop, gathered all that, and then put all of that into this spreadsheet. And what I have is I have a list of around 140 or so campaigns, and I will include a publicly shareable link in the caption thingy, in the description down below. I'll have a publicly shareable link so you can look at this yourself. Whether you are an individual, whether you're a creator, where this might be relevant to, whether you are someone who just likes data and wants to go through this and check my work, or whether, I mean, I can't imagine there's a third category. If you're just curious, I guess, if you're just curious, whatever it is, there'll be a link down below that you can go ahead and take. The link itself will not be editable so that everyone can have their own, but you can just go to it, make a copy, and then tinker with it as you will. But this is all reprint campaigns that funded to at least $100,000 that were run in 2024 and 2025. So for example, we have these campaigns. We have Project L and then we have the Project L follow-up. We have Lobotomy Manhunt and Lobotomy 2 Dimensions of Madness. We have Earth and Earth Abundance. We have Veiled Fate and Veiled Fate Tribunal. We have Root the Marauders, Root the Homeland. They just keep going over here. Captain's Log, New Horizons. We have the Fox Experiment, Lands of Galzira, etc. We have all these categories over here, and each one is categorized as being one of four things. It is either a campaign where the original campaign was run on Kickstarter and the second campaign was run on Kickstarter, or alternatively it's Kickstarter or Gamefound to Gamefound, or it's Kickstarter to Gamefound, or Gamefound to Kickstarter. Those are the four possible categories. Where was the original run and where was the follow-up campaign run? And then I look at the aggregate data. And I have a lot of asterisks. I am going to try to keep this on the shorter side. I have a full, longer video where I really dive into this data, but I'm trying to keep it as consolidated as possible. And effectively, if you have a Kickstarter to Kickstarter reprint campaign, I mean the original campaign was run on Kickstarter and the follow-up campaign was run on Kickstarter, it funds on average 2.86% higher. Versus if you run that campaign on Kickstarter and then move it to Gamefound, it's funding 90.55% higher. That is a huge and significant difference. It is a big difference in terms of how well a reprint does. And you can't say that, well, you'd expect a reprint to do more, that's why it runs higher. You would expect a reprint to do more. And yet, on Kickstarter to Kickstarter reprint funds 2.86%, Gamefound to Gamefound funds 18% higher, Kickstarter to Gamefound funds 90% higher on average across all of those campaigns. There is no cherry pick data over here. Again, I'll have links down below. If you see anything I missed, I will update, I will add it. So far, I've sent this to a lot of people and I've gotten one correction so far as the data, and that was I had one campaign accidentally labeled as a Gamefound campaign, one as a Kickstarter campaign. That was one piece of data that was incorrectly categorized. So far, I've yet to see anyone else correct what this is showing. Now, there also is Gamefound to Kickstarter, so a campaign that moved from Gamefound to Kickstarter on average funds lower. I would caution you to take that with a grain of salt because there's only like 3 campaigns that have done that, so the data set's not very large. I mean, even though that still does look good for the premise that Gamefound is a better place to run your campaign, I just think that there's a very small data set, so I want to caution you to be mindful of it. There's also things like back accounts. You look at the back accounts over here. So a Kickstarter to Kickstarter campaign on average loses 12% backers, and a Kickstarter to Gamefound campaign on average goes up by 8%. This is pretty compelling evidence, not evidence, data. This is pretty compelling data that would suggest that it is better to run your campaign on Gamefound if your campaign fits into this bucket of games. What I mean by that is if you can find commonalities between these games and yours, you should be considering why would your campaign be any different than these campaigns. So an example of that would be that I mentioned these all campaigns that have done $100,000 plus. So if you are looking at a $5 party game that you're only looking to get 10K, you can reasonably say, well, this data doesn't apply to me. And I would agree with you. So if your type of game, whether it's about the funding total, whether it's about type, whether it's the genre of it, if your type of project doesn't fit into these, then you could reasonably say, well, then I'm an exception. And to that end, by the way, one of the things that I have done, or I've had creators do with me, I've gone through this. Again, I've challenged people to run this data, to slice this data however you want, to try to draw whatever conclusions you want. Like, here's the data, here's the raw data, do as you will, try to show me, if you're a creator, considering where you should run your board game campaign, your tabletop campaign, tell me why this isn't compelling. And I've had people slice it a variety of different ways. I've had creators take a look and say, well, I only want to take a look at campaigns that raise at least $1 million. And you can do that over here. You can run over here, you can grab the filters, and you can filter to campaigns that have only been $1 million. You'd have to delete this. This is where I start getting to playing with the spreadsheets. But in order to remove a campaign from the calculations, you simply have to delete that, and it changes the numbers over here. So you'll see over here, you'll see a shift in the numbers. By removing those campaigns, it changes the numbers. So if I remove, well, I have to scroll down. But you can change any of these campaigns you want. Anything you delete will no longer show up in the calculations and will change the numbers over there. But you can remove that. So all you have to do is filter to campaigns that were less than $1 million and then delete all those, and then the data would update to reflect that. So I've had creators run the campaigns on only campaigns that ran at least $1 million. I've had creators run this by trying to manually go through this and find Euro games that are applied to them. I had one creator who was curious. He's saying, hey, well, this is great. The problem is the reprints are looking at campaigns that are, the date of the reprint campaign is 2024, 2025, but the date of the original campaign, they're all over the place. They're some of them are 5-6 years ago, some of them are from last year. And so what he did is to try to even it out as much as possible. He excluded all campaigns that weren't run within the past 2 or 3 years. So he basically took out older campaigns. And again, however you slice it so far, the data has been positive towards the idea that Gamefound is getting you better results. I've yet to see anyone challenge that. I am curious if you could, because 2 reasons. First of all is I think an open call to challenge the data is more compelling than a sales pitch. But also, if I got anything wrong, I will happily update and adjust it to whatever you want. Now, one thing I do want to say, especially if you are a creator, is there are no guarantees in life. These are averages, this is aggregate data, and so one thing I like to look at very specifically is this field over here. This field kind of gives you a sense of, yes, 90% might be the average of how well a Gamefound reprint does, but that said, that's an average. This is how much, this over here, this way to read this field, is on a Gamefound campaign, what percentage funded to at least 100% of the original. Effectively, what percentage funded to at least the original? And that's only 65%, which means on average, even though there's a 90% average increase, if you're running a reprint campaign on Gamefound, 35% of those reprint campaigns will actually fund lower than the original. Versus, if you do it on a Kickstarter, only 41% hit or 42% hit the original, meaning, what's the math on that? 58% instead of 35% fund lower than the original. So regardless of whether you're looking at the averages or the lows, and the fact that this never guarantees the data, and you can play with this how you want, by the way, you can adjust to say how many are funding to at least 50% higher. And in that case, only 40% on Gamefound get at least 50% higher, but only 16% on Kickstarter fund to at least 50% higher. I'm going to change that back over there. But that's the basic idea of this data. That's the basic pitch I have over here, where if you look at raw data that compares reprint campaigns as much as possible, and again, for clarity's sake, it's not mean only reprints, but it is focusing on reprints as a point of something that you can compare. It does seem to suggest that board games are funding better on Gamefound. And the reason I chase this data so hard is you have to chase general perception. At the end of the day, whenever a campaign doesn't do well, regardless of what platform it's on, there's always a bias towards, okay, what's going on? And Kickstarter does have the advantage in this category, where if a campaign goes on Kickstarter and doesn't do as well as you were hoping, it's easy to write that off to a certain extent as, okay, well, we are hoping it would do better, we just miscalled where things were. Versus that exact same campaign on Gamefound will get more scrutiny as to, oh, they should have used Kickstarter. There is a built-in bias towards the platform that has successfully been running tabletop campaigns for who knows how long and is the default platform to an extent. But even though it is the default, that doesn't mean that it's getting you better results. If you're a Kickstarter and you're watching this video, first of all, I welcome any clarifications or communications as far as the data that you're putting out. I will never knowingly say something incorrect about what Kickstarter can do. Kickstarter has done a lot for the space. Kickstarter has brought tabletop campaigns to where they are. There's been so much that's been done, and Kickstarter, I'm grateful for Kickstarter as a platform, for what they've done to the industry, for what they've done for tabletop crowdfunding. I am grateful for everything Kickstarter has done. That doesn't mean that I agree with everything that's being done now. But if you are someone from Kickstarter, you want to have a talk, by all means reach out to me. I'm happy to have a talk. I will never knowingly lie about the data, about what Kickstarter can do, or about your numbers. And I would hope that I get the same treatment in response. And if you're not Kickstarter, if you're someone who's interested in running a campaign, I think it's important that this kind of information is out there. There is a general bias towards the default platform. I don't think that bias is currently supported by the numbers of where tabletop campaigns are. If you've been paying attention to crowdfunding over the past, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, look at all the campaigns, the tabletop campaigns on Kickstarter, and look at the numbers they're hitting. And look at all the ones on Gamefound, the numbers they're hitting. I think there's a clear area where the successful campaigns are happening, where campaigns are hitting these numbers. I think it's clear if you actually look at the campaigns and break it down. There might be an instinctive bias towards how things have been in the past, but that was a long time ago, and things have been changing continuously over the past few years. Gamefound is always doing whatever it can to try to add new features, to try to communicate both with the creators and the backers as far as the features that they want, to listen to their requests, whether it's an app that was long overdue, whether it's a way to, anything, whatever it is, we are trying to constantly improve the platform to make it the best based on our ideas, based on the creators' ideas, and based on the users' ideas. But those aren't enough. At the end of the day, you need the data that shows that you're actually able to bring backers and bring funding. And I think this is that data. So yeah, that's my pitch, so to speak. This is very much a Gamefound video, and I do apologize. Like, first off, if you made it this far, kudos to you. If you are someone who's bothered by the fact that I'm doing this on the Board Game Co channel, frankly, I understand. There's a reason I try not to go full, support Gamefound on nearly anything that I do. I usually try to treat things just as business as usual as much as possible, with an occasional update on Gamefound features, and try to keep personal opinion as separate as possible. I think I've done one other video that was close to this, and it wasn't even nearly as much of a push as this one is. But I'm willing to do this because I believe in the data. I believe in the numbers. I believe in the results. And I think that if you saw this data, if you looked at those numbers, if you looked at those results, I think you'd believe it too. In any case, and until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe, today from Gamefound, and as always, I hope you have a good one.